4:33 on this Sunday afternoon. We're going to be here till 5 o'clock. Great to have you along here in North Texas as we continue on with Scott and the Doc. And we have been talking about an array of subjects this afternoon. One of the things that you probably, you continue on with your daily life. Do you realize it was 2 years ago this past Tuesday that the shooting of Michael Brown occurred on August 9th of 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. He was an 18-year-old black man fatally shot by a white Ferguson police officer. And what have we seen unfold in our country over the course of the last 2 years as a result of, I don't want to say as a result of that, but that was kind of the beginning of some of the issues. Black Lives Matter has come up after that. We've seen just what took place in Dallas, just down the street from where we're located right here. 5 policemen losing their lives from a sniper that was out for revenge and was going to make a statement. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. We don't have enough time during the course of the next year to talk about what has unfolded. But there's a gentleman that we were made aware of this past week who was a former police officer. He's a retired special agent, and he has a brand new book out entitled Surviving the Stop. His name is Bobby Kimbrough, and when we lost our scheduled guest earlier, we got a hold of him. He's in North Carolina, and God love him. He said, Scott, whatever. He's an African-American single dad of, I think, 7 boys. I talked to him for about 20 minutes yesterday and was very impressed with all that he had to share, and we really look forward to having him on the show sometime in the near future. But the near future has arrived a lot quicker than we thought it would. So, Bobby, I simply say to you, thank you for being on board and available this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for all that you're doing. So I really appreciate that.
No, we're delighted to have you on board. We're here with let me bring you up to date who the players are. You know a little about me, but Dr. Gary Lacefield and Dr. Rhonda Dobbs are my partners in crime here. They're both from the Department of Criminology. They're professors over at Tarleton State University under the umbrella of Texas A&M University. So day in and day out, they're dealing with what you have dealt with for umpteen decades as a member of the law enforcement. Be it special agent, be it a police officer, whatever, police officer. So why don't you just bring us up to date and tell us a little something about the book, Surviving the Stop, and where this all came to be.
Yes, thank you. And once again, thank you for having me. About a year or two ago, right after the Ferguson incident, I started seeing a lot of things happening as it relates to police and the community. The dividing wide of the African-American community and law enforcement. And while working as a special agent, there are certain things you cannot say and cannot do. So I started writing this book in my off time and just gathering thoughts of mine and decided, you know what? I want to put together something that brings the law enforcement community together as well as the community together, because there are two different outlooks on one another. So thus came Surviving the Stop. And in Surviving the Stop, we detail common sense made common on certain things on how you should interact yourself with. In all aspects of our society, there are etiquettes and protocol how you should handle yourself. For example, there's a certain protocol when you go to church, certain protocol when you go to movies, a certain expected behavior that is expected when you're attending that event. So therefore, we talk about experience and behavior. Your experience brings about a behavior in dealing with law enforcement.
Very interesting. What has the response been thus far for those of the folks out there that have read the book, that have seen the book?
It's been a great response. I mean, I felt like in writing it, it would get a fairly good response, but it's been great. So great that it has led over into the Hispanic community requesting that I do the book in Spanish. Good for you.
That is good for you. Gary or Rhonda, any thoughts that you'd like to share or ask Bobby?
Sure, Bobby. I think it's great, actually. I mean, we've been looking, for the past 2 years. I mean, a little longer than that, certainly, but 2 years, certainly it's been out in the forefront of the media and everything else at the issues that we've been facing. And I think it's great that you're addressing the issue of, we do have very different viewpoints coming from law enforcement and from the community, and that you're trying to bridge that gap, I think is amazing. If there were, one or two things that you were going to share about how to interact or how to behave in that interaction with law enforcement, what would those primary things be?
Well, the first thing that I tell my boys, as you alluded to, I have actually 5 boys that are currently driving on the highways throughout the country now. And what I tell them, the first thing you have to realize is the person that's coming up to the side of you, one is an individual. He's susceptible to all kind of the emotions, all the senses that normal people have, because that's a human being. So the first thing you want to do is treat them with the utmost respect. Whether you dislike that person or not, the profession itself requires a certain degree of respect, just as a clergy requires a certain degree of respect. I heard you guys talking earlier, coming to the show, how someone addresses someone as sir or no sir. Whether you address them as sir or no sir, still yes, there's an appropriate behavior that most of the time will change the atmosphere, because that's what you wanted to do, is change the atmosphere, thus for a change in outcome. So keep your hands where you can see them. When the officer asks you a question, answer the question as politely as you can, not in a smart or a negative comment. So many times I've heard comments that are made to officers, because once you go down that road, it's irreversible.
Right. The a lot of our students, or a good deal of our students, are law enforcement officers from local police forces and federal agencies and so forth, and we have them in classrooms with, for example, MBAs or business majors and so forth, and it's great to see the interaction between the law enforcement and the non-law enforcement students, where that they do understand now that these are real people. They have real problems. They get up in the morning. They
exactly.
Couldn't remember whether they kissed the cat or put the wife outside. One of those things. What did I do this morning? And so they're real people with real issues and so forth. One of the programs that I'm working on that will actually start delivering to some groups here in a few weeks is de-escalation. So what's your impression about de-escalation? And then I'll tell you what my thoughts are on that.
Yeah, you know what? That's an excellent point. One of the things that we talk about along the lines of de-escalation is also managing emotions under pressure. We call it MIA, because here's the situation. You're dealing with an individual that you have no idea what the call that he's answered before he stopped you for speeding, whatever it is. So when we're talking about officers and de-escalation with the individual, you can walk up on a situation. One of the things that I pride myself on is that my ability to communicate, because you can talk your way into more fights than you probably could have got into. You can also
Yes.
talk yourself out of a lot of situations, and a lot of it is your ability to communicate and realizing what you're dealing with. And one of the things that you say that I thought was interesting, how the students are interacting with the law enforcement personnel in the classroom. It is so important throughout this country that we start having real dialogue, that we start talking to one another, because here's what's happening now that frightens me, is we're lining up us against them, them against us. We're pitting one another against each other. And this is the remnants of what's happening now, is the remnants of the society we have created. And we got to slow it down, de-escalation, communication, and having real dialogue.
I agree. So when I think about de-escalation, and I really hate that word, because de-escalation means that something has already escalated. Exactly. When I teach my alternative dispute resolution courses, my mediation courses, one of the first things that I describe is that a mediator's prime directive is not to create additional conflict, because you're the mediator there. You already have conflict going on, so don't do something that's going to, quote, escalate the problem. And so, to me, law enforcement should have that same role. Is that so? You've pulled somebody over. You're clearly in control. There's not a threat. You've minimized all of the potential threats, and so then don't do something. Don't be a smart aleck. Don't say something that's showing that you're not a threat. You've minimized all of the potential threats, and so then don't do something. Don't be a smart aleck. Don't say something that's showing that you're not as thick-skinned as you probably ought to be, because you're the one in control. You're the officer. You're the one in control, right?
Exactly. Something else that would be excellent when we talk about de-escalation, we talk about training, and I was sharing this in one of the other programs, is that every 5 years, the federal government makes all of their agents go back to what we call background check. In other words, every 5 years, you have to be cleared again for top secret clearance. I think that would be an excellent idea if we took every so many years, we go back and we have dialogues with our law enforcement officers. In other words, we come back and have them go back through a psychological investigation, a psychological testing. Because the truth of the matter, once an officer comes on the job, he never goes back for a psych test unless someone in his chain of command says go back. So guess what? You never know what officers or law enforcement are dealing with. Because I said this in talking yesterday, is that I'm not the same person I was in 1984 when I started with the local police department. I remember seeing my first fatality, my first homicide, and how I was shook to my core. But then after seeing the second and the third one, you start to numb yourself, and you have to if you're going to function in this society. And what happens is we become so disconnected so many times, and we become what I call a shell, and you have to develop that shell. Sometimes that shell becomes so thick that we're unrelatable. And my mission right now is beyond surviving the stop, but I want to go back and have dialogue with officers because I know what they go through. I know what they deal with. I know the reality of carrying a shield. Whether you carrying a shield as a security guard, a law enforcement, I don't care what color your shield is, gold or silver, there are stressors anytime you strap it on. And there's stressors that just don't go away when you get home and have dinner with your family.
Great idea. I love your idea of going every 5 years. Boy, that's a super idea. Yeah, I've never heard anybody say anything like that. That said and done, is there anything else that comes to mind when we mentioned when we introduced you going back to Ferguson, Missouri? That's 2 years ago, this past week. It's hard to believe. It seems longer ago than that. But what we have endured as a country, as a nation, with what's going on, blacks and whites and whatever, what would you do as an African-American dad, a single dad? I said, what do you tell your sons? What do you tell them, and how we can change this whole dynamic in this culture to be what it should be, so we're all equal, we're all working together, and we're all on the same team? What would you do? A couple of things that come to mind?
Well, yeah, several things come to mind. One of the things that I often think about, I spend a lot of times, this may sound crazy, in my closet, just sitting there in a chair thinking. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that what would we be if we truly was our brother's keepers and it wasn't about me and about we? Because here's the thing, is that we have to be careful of the words that we choose because we give them life and we give them energy. And one of the words that's out here now that we've got to stop is a war against the police or a war against whoever. Because when we start saying war against either or, we pit people against one another. And not only that, when you say war, it changes the whole culture of atmosphere and having people to choose, well, whose side am I on? Because the truth of the matter is what we're having now is, an advice that I would give anybody is, we've got to start having real dialogue. And I would love to be a part of the program that the two doctors are talking about going around the country or going around wherever, setting up programs where we're going into the community with the police department. Because here's the situation. If you think about it, sad, but it's true. An officer that works in the African-American community, only time he goes in that community is when he's going in there to arrest or to work. 9 out of 10 times, he has no understanding of the culture. And whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, we got to have culture diversity training for those that go into those communities. Because I was sitting at a restaurant watching people come. Do you know, and you probably would know this yourself, Doc, is that each culture has its own way of greeting people.
Right.
Blacks even shake hands differently than the rest of the world, Caucasian American. They don't even shake hands the same way. You ever thought about that? If you watch two black guys walk up to each other, they go through what I call a ritual. They shake, they grip, and they hug.
That's true. That's absolutely
true. And you watch two Caucasian men, they stand, they shake hands, and they might pat each other on the back if they're close. But if not, they shake and they move. So what I'm saying is the differences is not a bad thing. That's what makes America's great. And we've got to learn to embrace them, and we've got to have real conversation with the police department and with the community, the black community. Because, you know, I know people say, well, they work in these high crime areas. That may be true, but everybody in that area is not a criminal. Everybody in the hospital is not sick. There's the people that work there, there's people that's visiting. So what's happening in America? We painting the brush is too broad. The picture is too broad. We've got to start, when we find someone that shouldn't be in a certain profession, we need to galvanize together and remove them.
Absolutely.
Because the truth of the matter, we cannot function without the police, and we can't keep this going on with this controversy that we have throughout our country. Last night, the night before that. It's saddening.
Yep, no question. Bobby, we've got about 10 minutes left in the program. Can you stand by? We got to take a break.
I love talking to you. I'll stay here as long as you want me.
You're a good man. We're back with more right after this. Hey, did you know that the biggest investment most people will make in their lifetime is the purchase of their home? So it's most important that you find a mortgage company that's experienced and knowledgeable. A lending company like King Financial Group, your Texas mortgage specialist. King Financial Group has been helping families achieve home ownership for close to 25 years. King Financial Group is all about choices, and you have many when it comes to your mortgage loan. You'll be provided with a free approval letter to make an offer on a home should you volunteer your credit documentation. And if you're short of time, it's easy to simply apply online at King Financial. If you're a veteran, teacher, police officer, firefighter, healthcare worker, or a small business owner, check out our Loans for Leaders program at loansforleaders.com for potential savings opportunities. For more information, simply call 972-539. Visit our website today, kingfg.com. King Financial Group, where you're treated like a king. Looking for a great video to preserve your family's legacy? Maybe a video that promotes your business or company for internet or promotional use. Seems just about everyone nowadays thinks they can create videos of their choice simply by pushing a button on their iPad or their smartphone. For capturing an everyday moment, hey, that's just fine. But if you want a professionally produced high-definition video of cutting-edge technology, then call us today at Murray Media. Whether live production or special event, look no further than the Emmy Award-winning team at Murray Media. From creation to capturing to editing to conclusion, Murray Media can get it done. From corporate to industrial to nonprofit videos and special events, television programs, TV commercials, website videos for both professional and personal use. Simply visit our website at murraymedia.net. That's Murray Media, always poised to video your world. Ever feel like you've been mistreated, discriminated against, simply on the basis of your race, skin color, national origin, sex, religion, disability, or handicap? If yes, then you need to get in touch with City Vision Services Incorporated. Located in Arlington, City Vision Services is a self-funded nonprofit, founded close to a quarter of a century ago, to help protect class members understand their fundamental civil rights under the Fair Housing Act, through education, outreach, and faith-based conferences. City Vision has also been a big supporter of our U.S. military veterans, who've been often subjected to housing discrimination on the basis of their disability when their service dog or emotional support animal is either prohibited or subjected to pet rules. City Vision is authorized to file discrimination complaints in all 50 U.S. states and U.S. territories. Call them today, 817-701-2385, or visit them online at info@cityvisionservices.org.
Time now for more of Scott and the Doc. Scott Murray and Dr. Gary Lacefield, helping you to deal with life issues in your life.
Scott Murray, Dr. Gary, Dr. Rhonda, and Bobby Kimbrough, our special guest, former police officer, retired special agent, and the author of a brand new book, Surviving the Stop. Rhonda, you had a little something you wanted to talk to Bobby about.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Bobby, I was really glad to hear you talk about the language of war and how divisive that can be. I've been talking in my classes to my students about that for a very long time, actually, and how perhaps that's not the best language to use. But we've been doing it since, the 80s. We started talking about the war on drugs, and then we had the war on crime. And invariably, when you talk about the language of war, it makes somebody your enemy. It makes somebody different from you, separate from you, and makes them somebody that you need to, react badly to, and I don't think that's the right language we should be using within our own society, certainly. So I was very happy to actually hear you talk about the language of war not being the correct language to use, because I think coming from that criminal justice side, from the government side, whoever you want to kind of point to with that, I think we've got to start using different language, and we've got to stop seeing this as a war and an us versus them scenario, because when you look at somebody at your enemy, what's going to happen? They're going to start start to look at you as their enemy. And I think that's the situation we've created, actually, with that language.
Right. And I agree with that 100%. You know, Bobby, you had mentioned that one of the big issues is communication. And communication is, I believe that wholeheartedly, that we have too much of the wrong kind of communication. Part of communication is understanding culture. People don't want to take the time to understand the perspective or the culture that people are coming from. Their own culture. They don't even understand their own culture these days. And so one of the things that Dr. Dobbs and I, Rhonda and I focus on in our classes is we talk about communication and those types of things. So, for example, last night in Milwaukee, where you had within minutes of the shooting, you know, you had this Twitter, this social media information that went out. You had a gas station set on fire. You had with people in it. There were 3 people in the store when it was set on fire. You have these what I call really acts of riots. Of course, we don't have a lot of riots here in Texas because we have Texas Rangers and one riot, one ranger mentality. But
what are your thoughts on all that when you see what Gary's talking about last night in Milwaukee or this weekend in Milwaukee?
I think what's happening, and you hit it on the head, is that when you start to use certain words, they bring about a certain result. They create a mindset. Once you create a mindset creates an emotion. Emotions comes action, then come outcome. And I use the example, we had a new agent. Well, he wasn't a new agent. He came to the office about 5 years ago. He and I I'll be honest, I didn't see eye to eye with him. I didn't like him. I didn't, for no reason. And I couldn't figure it out. And so I treated him a certain way based on that mindset. And somehow, some way, God fixed it where he and I ended up riding from North Carolina to the Atlanta Field Division for some reason, ended up in the same car. So for 5 hours, I had to ride with a man that I did not like. And do you know when we came back from Atlanta, we're best friends. Because once we began talking, our differences is what made us close. We had so much in common that it was frightening, to where when I got back, I told him, and I had to apologize. And I said, Jim, I disliked you. And then I realized that we all come to the table with a certain degree of biases, but if we don't have dialogue about it and engage one another in conversation, it's like a marriage. If you don't have conversation, it festers. And we got to stop this. We got to start, if I could say one thing, we've got to start having real conversations, not just this above the board, this politically correct conversation, not just this fruity conversation. We got to have something where we go to the root, to where we can sit with the community leaders, the clergy, the police chief, and we have conversation. Because if we don't, people talk about being attacked from the outside. I'm afraid of being cracked from the inside.
Right.
Because you think about every day we've had a shooting for the last couple of days.
Yeah.
And people are lining up on both sides of the fence.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bobby, I wish we had more time to talk. You have been spot on with just about everything you've shared with us. Surviving the stop. And I am correct in saying that as a dad of 7 boys, is that right?
That's true.
And now, did you grow up in an African American community as an African American? Did you grow up in a ghetto area, or did you grow up in what was it like? And I've got about 30 seconds for you to answer that. I just wondered.
Short and quick, I grew up on the east side of Winston-Salem. Both of my parents were working. My mother's an educated woman. My father had a high school diploma, and that's it. But I grew up with parents who were no nonsense and wanted the best for me. Even though it was totally African-American community, even though it was on the east side of town, they always instilled with me, see yourself where you want to be. See yourself beyond where you want to be. And I live by that principle today. Well,
I tell you what, they did a pretty good job. You have got to join us again. You've been our rock star today. Bobby Kimbrough, the name of the book is called Surviving the Stop. Thank you so much, Bobby. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. God bless all of you.
All right. Thanks much. Hold on if you can. Don't hang up. Dr. Gary Lacefield, Dr. Rhonda Dobbs, I'm Scott Murray. Till next week.